Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 56 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with Lizz Harrell, who is the founder of Sell Success, a company that works with startups to help them grow through making customers wildly successful. Hi Liz, how are you today?
Hey, Chow, I'm doing so well. Glad that it's Friday. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for being on the podcast. And yes, I hear you. It's Friday, the weather is nice. Hopefully, it'll be a nice, relaxing weekend.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
So, can you tell me a little bit about sales success and what exactly do you do with startups to help them be more successful?
Yeah, so I have spent my entire career in revenue generating, customer facing roles. It's been a wild ride. I think 9 to 10 total tech startups. And the past 4 jobs I've had have been helping scale post sales teams. And there's so much dynamic change. And so the company I was at last year was acquired. It's my first acquisition. And what I've noticed over the past year, especially, is there's so many things changing with how companies go to market. And I decided to basically go out on my own, start working directly with startups that are kind of trying to scale their growth motions. Scale typically land and expand. And it's something that I've typically kind of historically had expertise in, and trying to really kind of like drive that flywheel that grow through customer value delivery, and then being able to capture that by basically driving really good net retention. So right now I'm working with a couple different companies. I'm basically advising their CEOs, CROs, heads of CS on ways to better unify the customer journey, define the right role structure for their organizations, and then make sure that CS teams have the skills and abilities to really make sure that they're delivering excellent customer value that drives growth.
Nice. It sounds like focus on startups. Is it any specific industry or startups in general?
Yeah, so I'm pretty fortunate. I've been able to work at a lot of different industries. Started my career in hospitality. Obviously, you and I worked in payments. I've done retail tech, e-commerce, did data and analytics for a bit. So I was at Mode, got acquired last year, and then even just did a recent stint with a freight tech company. And so pretty industry wide, but probably the main thing is like stage. So typically companies that are just starting to build their go-to-market teams, and that's, sales, success, support. And then companies that maybe have scaled a little bit, maybe 100, 200 people, that are really looking at the model that they have. It's no secret, selling SaaS right now is really hard. Customer retention has been a big challenge for a lot of companies too. And so really trying to get back to that growth journey and make sure they've got the right people doing the right stuff at the right times, and then helping them kind of really drive that motion where customers both feel and see the value of their solution. And that turns into ultimately both they stay and they grow. So
That's really neat. So not so much the industry focus, but more around the stage of the startup, generally in
exactly.
that stage where they're about
Yeah.
to go to market. That's cool. So how do you go about like finding these companies? Do they reach out to you like on
Ah.
LinkedIn and stuff, or is it word of mouth? Do you have a website people can go to find you at?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's sell-success.com. That was an adventure in of itself. I have worn a lot of the hats on the go-to-market side. Never been a marketer. Wow. Building websites, implementing HubSpot, doing landing pages. I got to learn a lot of that myself. A whole lot of tinkering, lots of trial and error, lots of like really amazing partners and people who really helped me on that side. Asked tons of questions. Still always looking for feedback. So if you are a marketer, like feel free to give me your thoughts. And then yeah, I've been pretty fortunate that a lot of the business I've been building up so far has been coming from referrals and people that I know in network looking for help. But I am also starting to do a little bit more of that that BD effort, outreach, and just making sure that I can kind of fill the pipeline there too. So I've taken on kind of my first handful of customers, really just getting started, learning a lot, and then we'll try to continue kind of growing with, I think the next few months of conversations.
That's really exciting. I'm excited for you. It sounds like a really fun adventure that you're just starting.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's new. There's been a lot of people, I think there's a lot of change going on in tech. People been through so much change. And I think there's so much to learn. And that's really, I think, what's really exciting about going on and kind of starting my own business is working with multiple companies at the same time. I can see like patterns and trends and try to like learn pretty quickly and like what I'm seeing and like what's kind of people are going through. And then I can test stuff, which is pretty cool. It's nice to kind of tie my own income like to my own like outputs pretty directly, for better for worse. It's completely on me. So I sell, I service, I deliver, I expand, I do all of the things. And then I think it's also just it's an opportunity just to kind of, do something a little bit different as I've become a parent too. So
Yeah, now is as good a time as any.
yeah, flexibility is really nice too. So
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good segue into how many kids do you have and what are their ages?
yeah, so I have two girls, ages just turned 3 in October, just turned 3 now, and then 15 months.
That's so cute. 3 and 15 months. You must have your hands full. It's probably
Oh,
just running
it's
around, starting to talk, just
It's
wow.
mayhem. It is definitely, what I would say is with the 20 what we were the 2 under 2 camp for 3 months, and it definitely, like, got easier in, like, phases. So, yeah, it's been an adventure.
I'm picturing that. That's just so cute. I'm picturing a 3-year-old, 15-month-old, just a lot going on, but so, so cute.
Yes, and add 2 dogs into the mix. We have 2 little dachshund mixes, and it's total chaos. It's fun. I wouldn't have it any other way, but yes, like, some evenings are pretty wild.
How do they get along? Which one? I see a lot of like dogs with babies. The dogs are so patient because the babies just have their way.
Yeah, mine tend to run away.
So is it they're just kind of stay hidden from them?
Yeah. So it's funny, they're trauma cases, and I think the nice part now with, like, 2 is they got pretty used to the stages that our oldest daughter, that Elle went through, and so now, like, with Parker, who's our youngest, they're definitely just much more tolerant. So we went through trial and error as parents, and they went through trial and error as well, and now it seems like we're all, like, at least like, "Okay." So much more chill about a lot of things, the dogs included, so that's been fun.
Like this is what I need to do to survive.
Uh-huh. They're like, "Oh, we get this now." Like, this is no longer near, there's no longer some foreign, like, "What is this thing?" So they at least know what's expected, but they're a little bit more standoffish. But what's really fun is the girls, they love giving them, like, gentle hands, gentle pets, and the dogs have become a lot more tolerant of cuddles and snuggles too, so
That's sweet. And then as the girls get older and get more nurturing with the dogs will feel it, and then you'll
oh,
see
yeah.
that interaction, and that's super
Yeah,
sweet.
they're total little cuddle bugs, so eventually they will have new friends to cuddle with, and so that's the win-win, right? So
Yeah, that's adorable. I remember when my kids were younger, we didn't have dogs when they were younger, but whenever they saw someone's dog, it was like they would just run to the dog, wanting to hug the dog. And the poor dog was just so terrified, just
oh,
running
yeah.
away, hiding behind the couch or wherever to get away from them. But they didn't know anybody. They were just like hands just everywhere, just
Oh,
want to
yeah.
pet the dog. And like you
Oh,
said, you try to tell them gentle pets, but when they're so little, I don't know, 50% of the time they get it. I feel like half the time it just goes over their
the
head.
number of times per day that I tell my daughter not to touch something, not to put something in her mouth, that's the really fun one at 15 months when they're mobile, right? So, yes, the trying to put some form of boundaries on the instincts of our really small kids is an absolute, like, adventure, so
Yeah. And sometimes I tell them things where I'm like, I never thought I'd have to say this to another human. Like, don't put your foot in your mouth or don't, and you're
yes!
just like, why do I need to say that to someone?
Yes, yep. "Oh, that sticker doesn't belong there," or, "Oh, goodness, like, is that a rock? Oh, that's a pine cone. How did that get there?"
Right.
Yes, yeah. Crayons up the nose, that's a new one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they get creative. So, so what brought you to a career in tech?
Oh, accident? I was laid off my first job out of college. I didn't plan on going to tech. I went to school in Washington, D.C. I studied Chinese and business, and I had like this grand idea that I was going to move to China and like be a business person in China. That did not happen. Spoiler alert, when you're trying to get a job in a place where your main skill is that you speak the language, a lot of the times the nice people that would actually give me feedback would say there's like a billion people in China that speak Chinese. You need like real skills. I was like, great. I'll go get those. So I joined a company called the Corporate Executive Board out of college. Fantastic sales training. I was an SDR, cold calling every day. That was in 2008. The financial crisis hit. And I found myself being laid off from my first job like 9 months in, and took a job or two in between that. And then was pretty fortunate to get a job at a company called Cvent. And it was a translation of the skills. So I went from being an SDR for like a professional services firm to being an SDR in tech. And that was my first gig. And I am forever grateful for the folks that hired me at Cvent because, I think sometimes they say like things happen for a reason. And I didn't know that I was going to build a career in tech, but they gave me a shot. They gave me a chance. They gave me a lot of opportunity and responsibility, even when I was really young, to do a lot of great things. So that was my start.
Nice. That's awesome. Sometimes it's just that one opportunity and that kind
Yeah,
of directs where you go.
100%, right?
Yeah, I mean, out of college, I think I was looking for any job, right? I was like,
Yeah,
I have a
yeah,
degree, just any job. And then it was like, I interviewed for like back end engineer roles, front end roles. And then I ended up getting, at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do, you know? So it was just like,
yeah.
well, I got hired, I'll just do the job. And then I ended up really liking it.
Someone's paying me, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Woo! I got my first paycheck. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you decide like, do I like it or do I want to try something else? And it's like, that's the beauty. You can try other things. But then I was like, oh, I think I do like this, you know? But then it's like, it could go either way.
Yeah. How did you find your first job in tech?
It was out of college. It was on
Yeah.
Craigslist. I was looking. It was an ad
Do people
agency
still
on
find jobs on
Craigslist.
Craigslist? That's like, whoa.
Back
Amen. I
then,
love that.
yes.
Yeah.
Back in 2006, 2005, you were looking
There
for
we
jobs on
go. Oh,
Craigslist.
Craigslist. I haven't been on Craigslist. That's, believe it or not, that's actually how I ended up meeting my husband, is I found roommates on Craigslist and then
Oh,
friends the roommates. Yeah.
that's right. I always forget there's so many things you can do on there, right? Like
It was
sell things and just all kinds of
just a
things. That's interesting.
giant link marketplace, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so whenever I think Craigslist, I think of my first job, or when I think of my first job, I think
Like
of
Craigslist.
Craigslist.
I think it's
Because
still running and making money, so
yeah, because
good.
I thought
Good
of
job,
it just
Craig.
like looking on the newspaper. You know, back in the
Yeah.
day when you would look on the newspaper for jobs, or my
Circle.
parents, yeah, and they would circle and highlight. And so my version of that was going on Craigslist. But even that, I tell my kids, and they're like, I don't know, I don't, I don't understand.
I guess we're dating ourselves here, aren't we, right? Like, we're like we used to.
I get it. So, how many years were you working in tech before you became a parent?
Oh gosh, what? It would have been from 2009 until 2021. So 12 years.
Good math right there. I was still like, wait, 2021. Dude. Right. It all feels, it's
Took
all
me
a
a
blur,
second.
you know?
Oh, yeah. Oh man, pandemic babies. That's a thing.
Yeah, we should talk about that a little bit in a bit. So, what was your role when you became a parent?
Yeah, so I was on the exec team leading customer success, basically all things post sales. So that's yeah, I think the organization at the time was like 20, 25 people.
So, then what was it like when you were preparing for parental leave? What was that like? Because you were responsible for a lot, right?
So I was so fortunate, and I will thank my first daughter for making my first pregnancy so easy on me. Preparing was actually somewhat straightforward. I basically worked until I closed my laptop to go and get induced. She didn't have to be evicted. She basically kind of like made a deal, I guess. I was like, hey, just
She stayed till the end.
until like your due date, and like there's like some stuff that I just got to get done. Once we're there, we're good. Come right along. And then she kind of like took that and she was like, I'll give you like 10 days more. So I got induced about a week after her due date, but it was kind of one of the situations where I worked up until closed my laptop and then went to the hospital and got it going.
How does it feel when you have the baby like a week after due date? Because, for me, all three was early, and I just
Oh,
always
you
thought,
yeah.
like, oh my God, how would I feel when it's so I'm asking you, like, was your stomach super big? But the first one wouldn't be that big, right?
The first one wasn't that bad. I was really lucky. I didn't grow very far out. I grew like I'm pretty like I guess maybe I just have like a long waist. So I was really lucky. I didn't end up I mean, I had like some ground ligament pain, like some stuff, like some discomfort. That's like pretty standard in your last trimester. But it was pretty easy the first time. The second time, oh my goodness. I had the worst acid reflux in like I don't know what it was about that pregnancy, but my 3rd trimester, I could basically only eat carbs. I was so sick of like not being able to eat anything. I was so ready to get Parker out. But for my second pregnancy, I also got induced, but the main reason why was we closed the acquisition of Mode the week before my due date.
Oh my gosh, that's so stressful.
Yeah, so I was in a position where I could basically and I was so naive, I didn't even realize this. My OB was the person who told me. She was like, "You should really think about getting induced because your due date is so close to when your insurance changes. So you could end up if you wait too long, you could end up going into the hospital with one insurance and coming out with a different
Oh
insurance."
my gosh.
And I was like, "So what happens?" And she's like, "I don't know. I wouldn't wanna find out." And I was
Yeah,
like,
you're
"I
like,
don't
I don't
think I would
either.
too either, so let's do that." I was like, "We'll schedule the induction." And so that's what we ended up doing just to make sure that my insurance didn't like we didn't have, like, weird insurance woes because the acquisition officially went through at the end of July, and Parker's due date was July 26th. And so I scheduled me to do this on July 24th just to make sure that we were not anywhere near that, like, July 31, August 1 cover date, so
Wow, I mean, you already have enough things to stress about, and now you have to worry about this additional. Oh my gosh.
yes, that one was a wild adventure. So it was interesting. I think like for Elle, easy pregnancy, had enough time to plan, almost like too much time, interestingly enough. Everyone was like, "Are you like not gone yet?" And then the second one was sort of lots of chaos. Honestly, like going through an acquisition, it was my first. Didn't even really kind of like know what to plan in many cases because there was so much change happening. And so it was kind of like, well, I'm kind of closing my laptop, the company is completely different and we'll see what I come back to.
See what
So,
happens when I open it again the next
yeah,
time, right?
who knows, right?
We'll see, but I'm out for now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I totally hear you about like the acid reflex because I think like and not feeling well with the second, I feel like the first one I felt the best. And then
Yeah,
the second was worse. And I think that's how they get you. So you'll have more
yes, it has to,
kids.
right? I don't know how you did 3, child. That's the thing. Like my Dan and I are both one of 3, and like we're like 3 in theory, and then like in practice we're like, I don't know how we would do it. Like that's just don't know how. Like the second like birth was much easier than the first, to be fair, but like the second pregnancy was brutal. No, 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 no.
Yeah, my second pregnancy was worse than the first, but it wasn't that bad. And then the third
Yeah.
one was real bad. And I was like,
Oh, so it
okay.
does get worse. Oh, so it doesn't like maybe like bounce
Maybe
back where
for
it's like,
some
well,
people, but not for me.
like you're now that you're all in, like we'll just go ahead and give you a break, right? Like
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Oh
And then I
man.
had the diabetes, the
Oh, gestation I had my
yeah,
first,
yeah, I had
right?
that
Like
with the
that's yeah.
third too.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Yeah.
well, if I had that with the first and second, I knew I couldn't eat anything, then maybe not.
Oh yeah. I
So,
actually it's so funny. I don't know. The acid reflux was like so bad. I was like wishing I could go back to gestational diabetes. Because at least then I could eat like things like fruit.
yeah.
Fruit would give me like weird like
Yeah.
reflux. It was crazy. Like an orange is too acidic.
Yeah, like, would you be scared? Like, I was scared to eat because I just didn't know how strongly my
Yep.
body would react to it. So if I was
Uh-huh.
like, I would have a craving for a thing, but then I'd be scared to eat it. And I'm like,
Yes.
okay, let me just take a bite.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, no, this is not it.
Yep. Yep. No, you're so cautious. I was like, I know the things that are pretty safe. One also just like one tip that I was like, I always thought that mint tea was something that like helped your digestive system. Don't do it. That was my was like, you're drinking mint tea? I was like, yes. It's so funny. Like My OB is amazing. She's like got this like very, very dry, like no bullshit kind of like approach to things. And like the number of things I would learn, just like, okay, I guess I shouldn't be doing that because it relaxes your esophagus. That's how like in normal bodies or like when normal, I said like not that pregnant bodies aren't normal. Pregnant bodies are beautiful. Everything gets relaxed, right? That's how mint tea like helps you digest is like it relaxes everything. Well, if all of your organs are all the way up here and you already have relaxant going through your body and you're digesting your food more slowly, you don't want things being more relaxed. So don't drink mint tea if you're pregnant with acid reflux. Is like that was the learning I had there too. So
That's a good tip. Very good
yeah.
tip. I think when I was going through like all the morning sickness, because with the third one, it was morning sickness, acid reflux, and the diabetes. So it was just like everything,
The
yeah,
trifecta.
everything I wanted to do, I couldn't, you know? And so,
And you had two kids to chase
yeah.
around. Like you can't even like you like
And so I couldn't. I just was like, husband, my parents, mother-in-law, like I'm grateful they're all around. And I was just like, I'd be in the room, I'd close the door, and I just didn't know what went on outside.
oh my gosh. Like, oh gosh, yeah.
But then everybody would tell me like ginger
Yeah.
type things would help, right? So I would buy ginger ale, ginger tea, ginger candy, just ginger everything. And like I think it helped temporarily, but I tell you, I can't have anything ginger now. Like I'm just so traumatized.
Oh, I don't blame you. Oh my gosh. I
You know, it just reminds you of the time when you couldn't even stand up.
yeah.
It's too
You're like, I
much.
just like I'm just gonna push pause and I'm gonna go back here and I'm just gonna like can't eat anything off it like the discomfort as well. I don't did you get insomnia? I had bad insomnia.
Yeah, because you can't get in a good position and they're like, "Get that body pillow thing." So I
Yeah.
did, but it's still
And they're kicking you in the middle of the night and you're like, are you really gonna just be awake for like 2 hours? Like when I finally actually got down to sleep or comfortable. So
yeah, and then probably when you were pregnant with the second, your older one was toddler, right? So very young toddler, so probably she was coming to you at night too, right?
yeah, well, so we've been blessed, I will say, and or also this is like, as you probably when you become a parent, there are certain things that you're like compromising on, and there's certain things you're not. We were always like very, very, very aggressive about sleep and making sure that we set Elle up for like good independent sleep early. And so whether it was like things that we did, which honestly, sometimes I'm like, oh, did we do that? Probably not. Like she was probably just a really good sleeper to begin with. She's been like a great. So that was the thing that was always like really, really helpful. It's not that she wouldn't wake in the night, but typically, I mean, she sleeps like a rock. Like put her down and she just goes all the way through. So
Oh, that's awesome. That's especially helpful when you have a younger one to take care of and stuff.
yes, this is very, very true. And that's the thing. It's, I think the sleep consistency. Parker's had a little bit of a rougher go, not as good of a sleeper, I think, as Elle. But yeah, I don't know. How about sounds like did you have some adventures with
Yeah, I think they went through phases of sleeping well,
yeah.
but because there's three of them, there's always someone that's not
Oh,
sleeping,
yeah,
or that'll
that's
wake
fair.
up.
You go through like all of the phases. Like we just did
Yeah.
like the sleep transition with like the toddler rails. We're about to do like the full size bed transition in December for Elle, and that'll be another fun adventure.
Yeah, and then for a while we were like put them all in the same room, but then they would wake each other up and we're just like, you guys figure it out. Just and somehow they would figure it out,
Yeah.
but then in the middle of the night the youngest would still come over and it's like, do I get up and walk him back there and then he'll come over again and then I get up again, or do I just say you can go in my bed?
Yeah, so that's
And I'll tell you, you can probably guess what,
you're
what
like,
option I
yeah,
chose.
yeah. We've been like very, very fortunate that we have been able to somehow avoid the like, but it's also we were talking to a parent the other day whose daughter's having night terrors. And so we haven't hit like the nightmare stage yet. So that I'm imagining that's gonna be a much harder one, even with the independent like sleep skills that we have. Haven't hit the nightmare stage yet.
And sometimes with that, it's like, you reflect and you're like, well, they haven't watched anything crazy, but it could be something from school, a
Yeah.
story they heard, or a picture they saw. And that's the biggest thing for me when they start going to school. I realize like there's a whole nother side that I don't know. And, so I don't
Yep.
know where this fear or this anger is coming from. But then they come home from school and they start experiencing all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of guessing it.
Yeah. The Land Before Time gave me nightmares when I was a kid. I don't know if you have any anything
Right.
from your childhood that you're like, oh, that's kind of crazy.
Well, obviously Chucky.
Oh,
So yeah, you're probably like, what? Chucky? Yeah, we totally watched that when I was like, I was
that
probably
will
like
definitely give you nightmares
7.
as a kid.
And yeah, and so my parents had to like put away all the dolls in my room because, they had like those kind of real life
Oh yeah,
talking
they were totally
dolls or like,
old dolls were totally terrifying.
yeah, I
Like
had a doll that like rollerbladed and she like blinked and stuff. And it was like all that had to go. I had the
it's
American
really still with
doll,
like one of
all
the
of those had to
eyes
go.
like slightly closed, and you're like,
Yeah.
ugh.
It's like facing my bed, and then I wake up from dreaming about Chucky and I see the hat and I'm like, no.
Yeah,
Or like I dream of that doll coming to attack me and I'm like, I can't.
that's a deal breaker
That's
for
too
sure.
much. Yeah. So I'm glad that, you know, we're more aware of like movie ratings and things now than I would
Yes,
say
it's
the older generation was.
oh my gosh, like some of the things that were so traumatizing. You're like, yeah, like Hocus Pocus was another one. I'm like, there's a lot of scary stuff, and I mean, love Bette Midler, great movie, but like, holy crap, there's some disturbing imagery in there. So, like, they're literally talking about like witches eating kids.
Yes. But when you're little, you watched it and you were like, "Ooh, a talking cat. That's cool. Oh, that book has an eyeball. It's creepy, but okay." Right? And now you're like, "Wait a minute. They eat
Yeah,
kids.
like
That's what
what?
it's
I'm like,
about."
oh my gosh, that like how that was dark, right? Like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. But it was okay
Yeah,
back then.
you
And
know.
now when I try to show it to my kids, I'm like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't because that is kind of scary."
Yeah, it's
You
okay.
just realize it.
Like, traumatize them for life, like, give them who knows? I don't
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It's always a balance.
yes, it is indeed.
Yeah. So, what was parental leave like when you had your first and your second?
Oh, so parental leave during my first Mode had fantastic parental leave policies. And also I've just gotta like give a massive shout out to the state of California too, because parental leave, Dan got 12 weeks of paid parental leave as well. And I think that's a huge part of like the flexibility it gave us. Dan works for UC Berkeley. He's got a job where they certainly rely on him, and then naturally had a job where people certainly rely on me, and being able to kind of like flex that on giving us that flexibility to figure out how to handle childcare and like bonding and setting up L for success is huge. So I'm a big, big, big proponent of equality and like paid parental leave, and that the non-birthing parent also deserves kind of that time. It helps the birthing parent who also has a career be able to balance that time. So I'm a big proponent of that. So I actually didn't take my full leave. We did a transition, and so I came back early, only after about like 2.5 months, for two reasons. One, we were having transition, we had a new CEO come in. And so there was a lot of change. And so to kind of come in, support the team, support customers, close the quarter, it just made sense to kind of come back early. And the second, I actually dealt with some pretty bad postpartum anxiety. And I think talking to a lot of moms, and I've processed a lot since, and definitely came into my second a lot differently. A lot of us, quote unquote, ambitious, high achieving women, we like to be good at the things that we're doing. We've come up in our careers and we're really confident in our day-to-days, and that we kind of know how to solve problems and know how to like present solutions and like know how to move the ball forward. And that's like, it's for better or worse, a big part of our identity. And I haven't spent a lot of time caring for newborn babies. And so then to be in that position where day in, day out, I was the sole person responsible for, like caring for a newborn and trying to figure out how to like, sleeping and eating and breastfeeding and like transitions for growth and keeping them healthy and taking the doctor cares and what it was very different for me. And I had a lot of anxiety and had a lot of like self-doubt that crept in during that time. And it was a pretty tough period. Again, so I'm so grateful that Dan had the flexibility, and then we ended up getting a nanny and like help and all these things. But, he took time. And so I could go back early, and it helped me like kind of like reestablish a little bit of balance in myself, for better or for worse. Now, I took my whole mat leave for the second one. Like I was like, we're good. We got this. I'm ready to go. And there's still like some anxiety, of course, like too. But at least for the first, it was pretty challenging. I had a really hard time kind of like regulating that change from, working pretty long hours, pretty long days into now like this is a whole new role for me. And I'm not super confident in it. And I don't know what to do. And you can kind of be alone with a lot of those thoughts like all day, and it can feel pretty lonely. So, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah. Also, like at work, you can bounce ideas with people and you're always
Yeah.
talking to adults. That wasn't a thing that occurred to me until after on a parental leave. I was like, I have not talked to an adult in a
Yeah.
very long time. In
And
fact, I'm just talking to myself. And then
you're
this baby
there.
is crying. I can't understand him. I don't know. Like,
Tell me.
yeah, tell me what you want. Use your words.
I'm really good at asking questions. Oh, like what? How do I figure this out? And you
Right.
Google. Oh man. And it is. I'm very fortunate. I have like some great mom friends and people, but it's also hard even then to admit sometimes you don't know what you're doing. And you're like, oh, how many times can I like break down in tears? And just like, and of course the hormones,
Yeah.
there's so much stuff going on, right? It's a lot of change. So
Absolutely. So you said with the second one, it was easier. And were there some resources or some things that helped you cope the second time around, or anything you can recommend to others?
yeah. Well, I think there's probably three things. The first is just you've seen it happen before. And so you know what to expect. You're going to be tired. The second, of course, is just like how you structure help. I think we just thought very differently about how we structured help the second time. We spent the money, we saved the money and spent the money to get a night nurse was super impactful. And that gives you and your partner the ability to rest. And then, making sure we had family come in and having kind of handled that. And so I think that was like the second thing. Yeah. And just the third is, just making like friends with other moms in the area. The nice part about no longer having the pandemic kind of like weighing down was you just get outside a lot more, like meet with their other moms in the neighborhood who have kids the same age or similar ages, and we go on walks. And so that was a really nice, so it doesn't feel like you're necessarily trapped at home as much.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And you touched on kind of having a baby during the pandemic. So you had an older one and then you were having a newborn. How did
Yeah.
you juggle all of that during the pandemic with everything everything was so restrictive at that time?
Yeah, it was, and I think the really interesting thing, like obviously reflecting back, I mean, I wasn't sick for a really long time, which is kind of amazing. Like we quarantined. I got the COVID vaccine while I was pregnant. We didn't get like much exposure. And then even bringing Elle into the world, we were still pretty insular. Like we kind of just stayed in our own bubble. And yeah, I think like the toll on mental health was huge. I mean, we had family come through. We did, we try to get out and about a little bit. And so the communities we've started to build like after that, and especially like I actually think like we sent Elle to daycare when she was about 10 months old. And that was even like the parent communities and the learning that you get there is such a big part. And so I think as things started to open up, we kind of like took advantage of like trying to get into more communities where there were other parents with kids of similar ages. You get to know a lot of other people, a lot of other learnings from just kind of the parenting journey. And I've always just found that like community is just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the second one, the company had just been bought. So you were I think that's a unique situation, kind of handling all of that.
Pretty wild.
What was that like? Can you tell me a little bit about like transitioning back to work?
Yeah, yeah. Last year, basically started work on the actual like acquisition and the timeline. Mode was acquired by ThoughtSpot, and then the deal closed like a week before my due date. And that was interesting because there's just so much uncertainty just in acquisitions in general. And then I think when you're going through an acquisition and you're gonna be out on maternity leave, there's just no guarantees of a lot of things. And actually, kind of contrasting it with my first, it was kind of like nice. Like the hard part about my first role was I technically had a job that still needed to be done when I wasn't there. And so I would like jump into certain things. And for better for worse, again, that was, and I've come to terms with a lot of breaking some of that sort of like need and then the anxiety that sort of ensued from that. And the second time, like I didn't even really have a job to come back to because they were integrating the teams. They were going through like that acquisition process and trying to figure out who was doing what. And so no matter what, kind of coming back, I mean, even the first few weeks after I was out, a lot of my direct reports started reporting to other people. They kind of split some different roles throughout the company. And so then they kind of went guns blazing ahead through the acquisition process, and everyone was really gracious and like really good about having conversations about like what I was going to do. But no matter what, it was going to be something that was new just because that was the acquisition process.
So it sounds like when you went back, you were just in time to kind of be a part of figuring out some of that stuff.
So I actually didn't go back.
Oh, okay.
That's probably the big, and that was a choice. It was, I think it's amazing the things that give you, speaking of like having multiple kids, that the first one tricks you in, and it was so easy. We were so confident coming in, but that Parker ended up having some feeding issues. We went through a whole kit and caboodle of things. It was really, really tough with Parker's feeding. And the issue started around like 2 months. And so I had thought about maybe going back early. There were certain types of things or projects that I could have helped with, but I actually didn't end up going back at all. It is really what happened. So I extended the date that I expected to go back. Parker had minor surgery. She got basically a tongue and like lip tie. Like there was some physical sort of like challenges that we ended up having to kind of like went through a whole trying to fix. And so I kind of extended. And then by the time it was sort of like, okay, what roles are available and things like that, it was just like not the right, I think, fit in that regard. So that kind of is what caused me to sort of like leap into my next adventures is sort of from that decision.
Yeah, yeah. And then it also gives you more time to spend with your second one as well.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, I think, always the challenge when there's a lot of change and, a lot of women and hopefully men that go out and get to experience like taking that pause in life. Work keeps going. And I think that's always just one of the challenging things to deal with is you certainly don't expect the business to stop when you're out. And so when you're planning, of course, you want to make sure you're setting everybody up. And I love like the notion of being able to give space for other people to grow into like, the space that you've provided. And then also part of, I think too, this is a little bit of a plug on like the type of business I'm doing. You can hire sometimes like fractional executives or other people to kind of come in and support. So you make it easy for that leader to step back into their job when they come back. But yeah, I think that's always like the change is like the business is always going to keep running. Should not stop you though from maximizing your like leave because at the end of the day, those are hours, days, weeks that you never get back. So
Absolutely. I mean, especially in a newborn's life, like a month,
yeah.
2 months, whoa, they look so different.
So much change. They go from being a little screaming potato into like laughing and cooing and smiling at you. And you're
Yeah,
like, oh, great, great. That's why we did this. Cool.
right. Right. It finally makes sense at that point.
Yeah. You're
Like,
like, oh,
oh, okay.
oh, hi. There you are. Hello.
Yeah, it's a little
Thank you.
person. Oh. So, was there a mother's room at your work?
Yes. So Mode had a mother's room, which was great. And they were so wonderfully accommodating because we were still remote and we had an office in SF. But the beauty, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. So I did pumping, breastfeeding, and the beauty of being able to be on Zoom calls and have like my breast pump like right away. So that is like a true she could flex right there. Is just being able to like, oh, just like sitting. Oh yeah, it's like
Yeah,
right
you just do
there.
everything. No one can tell.
It's
Yeah.
kind of nice. Yeah, so that's amazing. And even when we'd have meetings or things like that, everyone was really accommodating for just making sure there were like breaks and things. So yeah, but the Mode had a mother's room.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then what do you do for childcare?
Oh, daycare. Oh my gosh, the trial and error of trying to find childcare. And again, like just being naive, not knowing, I've never done it. Hired a lot of people in tech. Oh man, it's a completely different job trying to hire people for caring for your kids. So we tried to do a nanny share that fell through. And then we had a nanny who was like just fantastic. And then we put Elle at daycare by the time 10 months. And then Parker went straight to daycare.
Got it. So now both are in daycare.
Both are in daycare and we love it. Although to be fair, the illness, I don't know what you do with your kids, but that's like I'm still like you like I'm like the number you should see the number of tissues in my wastebasket, not to be disgusting. But yeah, Parker literally has brought home something every it feels like 3 to 4 weeks. We're finally just coming out of it. And she's like been at daycare since 6 months. So and she's 3 months now.
I feel like there were a few years where it was everybody was just taking turns getting sick. There
Yeah.
was never, maybe there would be a week when nobody was sick, and then that was it. And I was like, is this it? Is this my life? Am I just gonna be sick the rest of my life?
We
But the
are,
good news
yeah,
is once they go to elementary and stuff, then it's like it's a lot less frequent. Of course it still happens, but a lot less frequent than daycare and
yeah.
preschool. So
Yeah, and that's, I think like, oh man, buy tissues from Costco. Saline is amazing.
and you need
That's
like lotion and stuff because they're
oh
little
yeah.
noses, right? You can't just use normal tissue.
Nope, nope. They get like red right through it. And of course, like my daughters both have like super sensitive skin. Poor things.
So then do they go to daycare all day? What is that routine like?
Yeah, so we're lucky. So Berkeley's early childcare education program does 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so drop them off, we pick them up. They have a fantastic day. They provide food.
Oh, that's awesome. Do they do potty training as well?
So they're really helpful with potty training. We did like the weekend no pants method. And so Elle started like showing some signs of interest at like 18 months. And so we found it easiest to have like a little potty that like, and bath time was kind of so you're not like pulling a diaper on and off. And so it like kind of just give her like if she wanted to, she could like sit on the potty before bath. And then yeah, so kind of went from there. And then we didn't do a whole lot with potty training until a few months after Parker was born. Just 'cause we're like, this, it's a whole choice. Like, and that's a whole nother job to be done. And, 2 kids in diapers is certainly a lot, but I don't know if did yours ever overlap where you had multiple in diapers? Yeah, it's,
Yeah, like some had pull-ups and then there was like the newborn
yeah.
diapers, the swaddle type, and then there was the other diaper. So we had like different sizes at one
All the
point.
diapers. Yeah, that was we had the pull-ups and the size 4s, the newborn anywho, and so, man, and we do Earth Baby, so the compostable ones where they come pick them up. Big fan, and they picked up a lot of diapers. A lot of diapers.
See, the thing is, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much diapers, but then also sometimes it's just easier. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's just when they're little and they just gotta go, they gotta
Yeah.
go. And sometimes you just can't find a bathroom and it's like,
Uh-huh.
good, you have those training
Yes!
diapers.
Well, and
I'll just go
that's the thing that
inside.
you don't quite realize. It's like you do potty training, you can't really go back from that. So you're like, okay, so we have another
Yeah.
little travel potty in like our car. And yeah, the number of times we pulled over and had to like figure out, oh man, you're like, you can't go back. Or like the power struggle of going to the potty before you leave the house. Like that's like, do you need to go potty? No. And then 5 minutes later, you're driving. I need to go potty. Ah.
But I didn't have to go 5 minutes ago.
Of course you do. What? Really? Like you didn't you couldn't have just gone 5 minutes ago. Yeah. No, potty training was yeah. I say it will be on the cusp. It's like Parker's coming pretty soon and like, oh man. Ah. That's a whole other adventure to go through yet again.
Yeah, I hear you. But I tell you, I've not seen an adult that has not been potty trained, so it will happen.
It will always happen,
It
right?
will
That's
happen.
always that's the silver lining. That is an excellent point. It will always happen, and we were ready to be done with diapers for Elle, and so we'll kind of see when Parker is ready. I've tell me though, I've heard that sometimes the second, because they see the older
Yeah.
one and have a much clearer example, that sometimes they go faster. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
We have seen that. I feel like our second and third were faster than the first one.
Yeah.
Well, the third one was a little bit more like, I just don't want to do it. Like you could tell he could do it. He just didn't really
Yeah.
want to because he's so lazy. He just wants to play.
Yeah.
But the second one, he would see his brother and he would just
It's like I can do
copy,
that.
you know?
That looks easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I feel like he walked faster. He picked up eating habits faster and things like that, just watching the older one. So
Yeah.
it'll
That's
be interesting when you see when she hits her milestones and
yeah,
stuff.
I'm curious. Yeah, we'll see. It'll be nice. We chugged it off into phases. It was like independent sleep, where we finally had them sleeping in the night in the crib by themselves. And then it was bottles and breastfeeding. Oh man, that was a nice one. That was July. And then it'll be diapers,
Not that long
right?
ago.
Like,
Yeah.
and then it's the bed transitions. Like we had not originally thought the bed transition was that big of a deal until we were like on the cusp of doing it. Then it was like, oh, now they can go rampage in their
They can
room
get
or like,
out.
yeah, get out.
Yeah.
It's like, haha, that's a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But it's all exciting, exciting
Yeah.
milestones. And it's
Yeah.
awesome that you're able to work from home right now and you're able to see all those milestones. Because I think when you're off working far away and stuff, it's just so much harder.
Yeah. Well, it is. I have so much respect for the parents. There's like two sets of parents, and I'm just like, I don't know how you did it. Like the first is the before the pandemic, I commuted the office like 15 minutes each way. And I guess people like, it's like if you had to be there for an 8 a.m. meeting or whatever, like you just didn't. And so now like the flexibility that hybrid and everything, and it is. I love I love like seeing people in person, and we've changed so much, and just like the flexibility and like the sense that, yeah, you can log on after you put your kids down for bed and like get a couple more hours of work done. Like you can figure out
Yeah.
like how to get like the time in that you need. And then also parents that, I mean, how old were your kids during the pandemic? Like parents that basically became
The default everything.
all things. I don't know how you did it. Like, I like literally, wow. I have so much respect for parents who were parents of like small kids, like grade school kids that just had to figure out how to like do Zoom school or be the daycare or the childcare for like a really long period of time. Like that's just also, while also working like that. I just don't know how you manage that.
We just made it happen. We're like, okay, we don't have enough computers. Let's get enough computers
Yeah.
because everybody had class. So it's like, okay, get everyone a computer, but then you can't all be downstairs because then all that noise is going to be really loud for each other's,
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's like, okay, let's try to get everyone in a room, but then I need to be in a room too for work. And so
Right.
bless my husband, at that time, he was like, okay, I'm going to just focus on the kids. And he would just go from room to room to check in on
Oh
them.
my
And,
gosh.
and my youngest, he was in preschool. And so, come on, online school for preschool. It's like, okay, let's do
Yeah.
circle time on Zoom. And you hear all these kids screaming and you hear the
No, did
teacher
they
like,
really do circle time on
yes, and the
Zoom?
teacher's like, "Get off the couch, mute yourself." And later they got the hang of it, but in the beginning, right? Nobody
Yeah.
knew how to mute. Nobody knew how to do anything. And I hear my husband yelling at my kid, like, "Sit down, put your feet down," because to them, they're like, that signal of like, I'm home. So I'm in my
Yeah.
pajamas. I should be able to sit how I want. But then no, you're also in class. So you have to pay attention. So it was
Oh,
like
that is
mixed signals for them. And then the older ones, I'm hearing that I'm like, are you just getting up to go to the bathroom? And they're just like, it's okay. My teacher doesn't mind. I'm like, but you should be sitting there. And so it was a lot of, you know,
that is
yeah, it's like after we got the hang of everything, it was good. But I think that initial was kind of like, whoa.
oh my gosh, and so you were both working with, like, 3 kids doing Zoom school at the same time?
Yeah, so then my husband stepped back from working
Okay.
during that time so he can like focus on thank goodness he did because
Yeah, I mean, I
you
don't know how
know,
you would do like, how would you do it? I mean, that would put
yeah.
parents in such a challenging position.
Right, right. It's just really hard because also like, the amount that they teach on online school versus when they go into school is different. So
Yeah,
then there's a lot of gaps that we need to help fix for them when they're doing the homework and stuff. And then the year following virtual school, you could see clearly that like there was a gap, because
yeah,
they didn't learn as much as they could during virtual school. Even now, like when I talk to my kid's teacher, she's like, we're still catching up from
yeah.
the pandemic times. And so
Ugh.
it's an adjustment, they got used to electronics a lot faster than I would have anticipated, that I would have hoped, but what are you gonna do?
Amazing how fast, like, a freak even, like it's amazing how fast, like, a baby can work an iPhone. I just like
Right, like, your
right.
kids, so young, you give them an iPad, they'll probably figure it out in, like, 10 minutes, right? I don't know how, but they will. So, yeah, it's crazy. But how has your work life changed since you became a parent?
Yeah. I think it's tough because on the one hand, I think like how I set boundaries has become very different. And I think that work is always about, I think there's just the nice part about sort of like the post-pandemic era is work is still outcomes oriented, ideally. And so the goal is that, as long as you're achieving your outcomes, you set the boundaries. And so pick up my girls 2 days a week. Dan does drop off every day, but that's kind of a non-negotiable. There's something I log off at 4:30, right? Now, I think basically how I've had to balance like Sunday evenings or logging back on or things like that because I've typically had demanding jobs and that's really shifted the game a lot. And then I think the second thing is a big reason why I decided to kind of go do my own thing for a little bit is just the flexibility is really nice. And these years are like not necessarily years that you get back. And I think it's not to say that I couldn't do I think a lot of like the challenges in like customer management, customer facing work is like to really like continue at least like to progress and like to be like as like effective at that, especially if you are going back in person and doing more travel. This is not that era for me right now. I would love to get back to doing more travel in person and customers. And I do some in my work with like the clients that I have. I was in Texas for a bit. I'll be heading to New York in a little bit, but it's a little bit more controlled like by me than like mandated by the company. And that's just different. And that's the nice part. Like the flexibility, the control is really, that's just the era that I'm in right now. And I think it's given me a lot of flexibility in that regard. So
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's like you get to control your schedule, but then financially, that's also up to you. How well you
yeah.
do and things,
Yeah.
that's also your control. But that's really nice that you get that flexibility right now so you can travel when it works for you and then be there for the kids as well.
Yeah, because if I don't they're like, "Oh, are you doing consulting or just doing consulting, like, in between gigs?" And I'm like, I honestly don't know. I think for, like, the right option, everyone would always be like, "Great, if you had, like, an awesome company with, like, real potential for impact, of course you'd consider going." But, yeah, I think the nice part about right now is just it's nice to kind of balance things a little bit differently than I used to.
Yeah, and what works for you now, it might change next year. Like you said, it's like it could be what I'm doing right now, or it could be what I'm doing in 5 years. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we literally just got to where evenings were no longer just like a total just total chaos. It's like, but for a while for kids coming home, it's like between dinner and bath and like, yeah, but now it is like Elle's a little bit more independent, Parker's a little more independent. And so this is gonna sound like I'm just a total weenie. Like we didn't even really like solo parent until maybe like a few months ago. Neither one of us would necessarily just take the girls by ourselves. We would tag team. And, that was kind of like a choice in many cases. I think it would cause me a little bit, be like, oh my goodness, that's a lot to handle. But also, like, the blessing is like we've spent so much time together as a family, which is really nice. We sit down to dinner and eat dinner together as a family pretty much every single night. And we've been doing that for a long time. And I think as getting back in the work, I've got work dinners and something Dan has things. And so we do now sometimes have one parent handle the kids for like a morning or evening. But that's pretty new. Like we got to kind of settle into a routine. And that is, I wouldn't trade that time for anything. So
It's awesome to have that partnership, but also I hear you because kids at that age, they're so unpredictable, you know?
yes.
So it's like you got to have somebody on guard at all times because you just don't
Uh-huh.
know. Like, I don't know, everything could have been fine. Everyone's showered, and suddenly this kid needs a bath now. And like, you just don't know.
Yes, well, and,
So
like, yesterday, my daughter I don't tell, like, a ton of stories, and so I don't wanna, like, embarrass her. This is all, like, for posterity. But, yeah, like, she got very upset that the song that she wanted wasn't coming on the radio, and, it is. Little feelings, little emotions, and also the end of a long day, and she was very, very unhappy at home for about 30 minutes straight, so that was pretty tough. And it is, like, that's, like, kind of just the thing, and so the unpredictability and then kind of just the beauty of this age, which is I actually everyone says terrible twos and things like that. That is not to say that it is easy to kind of like handle and manage and like, try to figure out how to support young humans this age. But I find it to be like quite fascinating because they're basically coming into their own. They're discovering their own autonomy, what they can and can't control, their emotions, their feelings, like how they respond to things, they respond to the world. And it's big, it's a lot of processing for them. But actually, not to like tie things too back to like talking my job as a manager and like leader and things like that. But I think that's been like one of the most fun areas of learning is you learn so, so much about human nature and behavior by trying to like support the development of kids at this age. It's pretty wild. I really enjoy this age. I think it comes with its challenges. And I think being super hands on is like a really, really nice thing that we're getting to do right now with the flexibility we have.
plus they change so fast, especially at that age. So it's like when you can be around to see all those changes, it's really
Yeah.
fascinating to see how they grow.
Yeah.
So you talked about this current age, you touched a little bit on that. I was curious what's your biggest struggle or challenge? with their current ages right now?
Oh man. Probably the biggest is as they're starting to interact, it is so heartwarming and wonderful. And then also like now we're in the thick of trying to figure out how we help them basically negotiate against each other. And Parker can't, let's be clear, Parker cannot negotiate. She's 15 months old. She does not have any of the communication skills to communicate to her sister, stop splashing water on me. So you're kind of like in this motion where Elle is at the age where she is learning at school how to like, set her boundaries and things like that. And then Parker's, of course, at the age where it's just like they're like snatching each other's cookies, like whenever they can, just sticking them in their mouth. So that's probably the hardest is again, it's like one child, you're going to go through all the stages for them as individual. The complexity of having like the 1+1 combination is all of a sudden like the number of like scenarios actually. It's now exponential from what you kind of realize because it's these two people interacting. That's what we're learning a ton now. It's like, okay, great. We were like, okay, you parent one, now you're parenting two together. You have your one-to-one relationships and then their relationship. And that is completely new to us. So, how we kind of cultivate their own ability to work through conflict and like, keep their hands to themselves if that's what they need to do, or like find the things that they can play with. And that's probably the newest one. So,
Yeah, and it's interesting because you parent them together, but then they're so different, right? Their
oh, yes.
personalities, the way they respond is so different. So it's like you need to really customize to each one.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And that's what's so fun. I mean, and their personalities are. I mean, not to like, I feel like all parents like try to find themselves in their kids. So it's probably natural. But it does seem to be that like Elle's personality seems to be a little bit more like Dan's. And to be fair, they're both eldest. And then Parker's personality seems to be a little bit more like mine. We're both second on the middle, technically. So it's been pretty fascinating because, yeah, they definitely operate a different level. And it's fun. We've actually had teachers, they've had some of the same teachers at daycare. The really beautiful thing about Berkeley's daycare is a lot of the teachers have been there for like 15, 20 years. And so they have a couple of teachers that have had both of them, which is really fun. They give us like really fun stories and they're like, yeah, like Elle was really much better. Like, whoa, she's so different from Elle. That's pretty wild. So it's fun. But yeah, we end up in situations where we're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Yeah.
But you get through it, you know? You just deal with
Yeah,
it and you get through it.
I think that's the biggest learning, at least for me, is as a parent and, as a parent who is used to being good at things or knowing how to approach things or oftentimes like solving problems I've seen before. It is a whole new thing, but that's why again, community's big. We ask lots of other parents for their opinions and people who've come before us for their advice. And then also the partnership that Dan and I have, I think is a really, really good one where we tend to figure things out together really well.
So what would you say is the biggest struggle or challenge for a parent
I
in
mean,
tech?
I think that probably everything. There's this era, and there's probably, I was the really annoying person that probably didn't have kids and worked all the time, and it's some era too. And I think the idea of how you like merge a lot of those people disparate journeys is still a really challenging one. And look, I reflect on even some of my time as a leader and things that I would have done differently, right? Before I had kids. And I think that's hard because I think a lot of as I even just talked about, what you learn from like a leadership perspective or people management of like having kids that are young kids. And then as you're going, you probably have like hocus pocus skills that I could not even like dream of yet, Chow, although you've been always a really good manager. I think that's always one of the things that's like pretty fascinating is sometimes I think oftentimes some of the soft skills and leadership skills are like undervalued in like the tech workplace. And I think that's one of the things that will be probably like a constant as we're going through so much change is what types of skills are valued, how they're valued, how people are evaluated against them. And yeah, so I don't know if that's like a parent in tech. I think that's still the kind of like how you kind of like handle people at different stages in the workplace. But I always get really curious about how, with the rise of AI, more automation, things like that, what does that unlock for people in many ways too? So hopefully there's opportunity on the other side of those questions.
It's interesting, like, you can see it's already affecting a
Yeah.
lot of things, even, like, my kids' schools, their teachers send out an email and say, "Do not put your essays through AI, do not write the paragraphs, essays, I will know," you know? And
Yes,
so
it's pretty, yeah. I bet teachers are like, "I've seen it now a few times."
yeah, like, it's a thing now that
Yeah,
kids need to, be prepared to deal with because, now it's your word against teacher, right? The teacher's like, "Well, I feel like you took that," and you're like, "But I didn't." So, so my kids are now in middle school, high school, they're very worried about that, I'm like, "But you didn't use it. It's okay." They're like, "Yeah, but what if it looks like something that someone else wrote?" And it's a thing, a real thing now for them.
yeah. Well, and that's always and maybe, like, a question your kids are further along than mine. It's like, what skills do you think are critical for them to learn? Because, probably, like, writing an essay on, like, Dickens is, like I mean, if I look back, probably the ones that I wrote when I was in, like, junior high, probably not super original, right? But, like, so what do we teach our kids when the computers, like, can do a lot more of the work than when we were young, right?
Right. And then it's also like how much, okay, sure, you can use it as a reference, but then how much do you change from it? How much do you actually take
Yeah,
from it? And what are you subconsciously putting into, and that's why my kid is just like, I'm not going to run anything through AI because I don't want to accidentally
yeah,
take one of the ideas and somehow believe it's mine, reword and stuff, and then it comes out and I get in trouble for plagiarism. So I'm like,
yeah.
okay, we do it the old fashioned way. Let's read more books and
Well, maybe the old-fashioned way, like, 'cause AI is still never a first-person source. Maybe the value is just to help it I mean, I imagine, like, AI, if you're trying to write, like, a research paper, like, it's great to know what sources are available on a specific topic, like, that'd be awesome, right? I don't know about you, but, like, I used to like the Dewey Decimal System in the library, pulling through the cards. That was
yes.
brutal, right? Like, I mean, my goodness, nobody, I guess, has to do that anymore because at least you can just search the first bit. But it would be, I think that's kind of like interesting. Hopefully, the notion, I think, creativity, like connection, all of those things that I think are super important human skills. But yeah, it's like, what do you rely on it? I mean, we're in the first innings, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we just evolve as our kids get exposed to more things and we just kind of see, right? Like how much do we
Yeah.
let them get exposed to, how much not? And then there's a whole nother part that we don't see. And then I'm trying to ask them questions to understand more about that other side that I don't see, And that's all you can
Yeah.
do. So, what would you say would be the biggest benefit being a parent in tech?
Oh, benefit? Yeah, it's gotta be the empathy and humanity. And that's not I think that's not to say that it's like, most of my life, like a lot of my life before was the things that I was focused on was the company and then my career and myself, right? And my partner, like we lived a pretty good life before we had kids. And it's interesting when you kind of like shift your boundaries and your priorities to, and I think it's raising humans, how it changes your organizational systems, how it changes how you think about people and how you think about what type of people you're raising and how you're, supporting and influencing their development. I think it's just the amount of time that you're spending investing in like, two little people. I think that like compounds to how you approach a little bit more of things at the workplace. And I've always taken a lot of joy and mission in developing people at work. I'd say I had certainly like missteps and learnings along the time about like how much like I challenge people and typically I would say I challenge them because I believe in them. But I think my approaches now and like my sensitivity now to how to think about really, really deeply understanding somebody and like really deeply trying to understand like how to communicate to be like effective, not just to communicate because you like need to because you're moving so fast. That's, I think, a really the beautiful thing about the gift that we get as parents is we are tweaking and doing things every single day, trying to help develop and steward and lead our little people. And that's a really amazing, like, iterative cycle that can also, I think, you bring into the office and you're stewarding and you're leading people. And that is a really, I think, a big key benefit. So,
Yeah, and you were saying earlier too, a lot of the management skills
yeah.
can transcend from home to work and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. So the last thing I want to ask is just what's something you would tell someone who's planning to have kids or something you wish you knew before you became a parent?
Oh my gosh. The conversations that you have with your partner on the journey, and I hope that people have, and if they don't, obviously, that's your whatever community you're building for yourself is just as important. Basically being really, really well prepared for how you're going to handle things together. And then making sure you're growing together. There's a lot of places for disagreement. There's a lot of places also just for confusion, or the number of jobs to be done like explodes so much. And when you have a true partnership, your heart expands in so many ways when you first become a parent, and then like how it expands when you have first time grandparents, or like your partner's also first time parent, and like all of those things are so huge. And that's kind of the key thing of us, because if you have good partnerships, if you had good community, if you had like if you have that like really well set up foundation, I think that's so important. And again, community and family is also, it's always what you make it. And that's a big thing too. It's the support system and everything that's around you. I think that's like the biggest advice I have, is just really, really invest. If there's things on your mind, if there's concerns, if there's anxieties, like try to like establish that open communication early, because once the kid, it's just, you're going to have to assume positive intent about so many things. And then how you divide and conquer and figure out who does what is so, so, so important, because the worst miscommunications that I had early was over things that like it was miscommunication. It was, and that I struggled a lot because I didn't necessarily know how to tell Dan what I needed. He was observing stuff but wasn't fully processing it. And so we went through like our first couple of months were really, really tough. But because we have that good foundation, because we communicated, because we kind of like figure out how to get there eventually, it set us up for like a much easier path forward. So partnerships, everything.
That's great advice. Because I think, like, also when you're in it with the kids and stuff, you don't really have time to really have those conversations. A lot of times you have it after the fact, or
Ah,
like when you remember, when you're like, oh, I
yeah.
got sleep last night. I meant to talk to you about this thing. And then it's like, you don't know where that other person's at that point. And so that could
Mhm.
lead to a lot of disagreements or
Yeah.
miscommunication and things like that. Right. So having that open communication early on, and like you said, having that community, regardless if it's finding friends, moms in the community,
Yeah.
family, your partner, whoever, just having that community, you can even like ask questions. I know there was a week when my kid didn't poop and I was like, what do I do? Like I went to Google, but then I was like, I would love to.
Like, that does not seem normal.
Yeah, I was like, I would love to just ask another person, not some stranger that I saw on a forum online. So
Yeah.
having that community is
And
huge.
then asking for help is such a big one, right? And that's, I think, some of the earliest learnings, it was just like, just ask is always the key thing too. Like just ask. And I think that's, whether we're too proud sometimes or too independent, or we think we can do it ourselves, right? Or you just want someone to notice that you're struggling.
To notice and then be like, "You see I'm tired."
Right? Like sometimes I was like, Dad, did you just notice? Like, right? Like, oh,
Yeah, like, "My
yeah.
hands are full, there's a kid on
Yeah.
you see it, why aren't you asking?" It's like,
Yeah.
"Well, if you need help, you would ask me." And it's like, "Well, I shouldn't have to ask you." And then it's like then I realize, "Okay, ask for help."
And then, oh, you've been through this a few times, yeah. And that's always the thing, and that's why I say assuming positive intent is, like, there are so many different ways that parents, like, you and your partner are processing, and I think that's, like, the thing where just, like, those, like, miscommunications that were, like, seemed, like, so big early, once we finally got to where we're, like, really, really talking about it, we just got a lot faster and more efficient and just like more effective, just being like, very open and honest. This is we weren't like before, but it is like just the job's to be done. It increases. It's totally worth it. Absolutely worth it. But I think oftentimes it is very surprising how much work it is early if you don't kind of like account for that and try to figure out like again, and you'll get through it is always the thing that I tell people. Like I made it through like not a newborn baby person, and I made it through like two, right? If I can do it, you can, like, situation. I'm like, "You got this." And that's the thing is always, like, it's more work than you expect on less sleep. But if you can figure out how to ask for help and communicate what you need versus sometimes I fell in the trap of expecting sometimes, and that puts you in a pretty tough space. So
Right, right. Then I realized, like, okay, if I need help, I'm just gonna ask for it and say exactly what I
yeah,
need, and then I'll get what I
yeah.
want without being angry. And it works
Yes,
out.
yeah, and especially with in-laws, like, the or when you're, like, the grandparents, everything coming through, like, that's the other thing that's a really interesting when it comes to asking for help, like, what they used to do with babies, I don't know how we all survived, we obviously all did, but it was like, we used to be put down to sleep on our bellies with all sorts of stuff in the crib and who knows what, like, safety, uh like, everything from the '80s has been recalled, right? There's, like, lead paint and toys. At a certain point, we, like, all figured it out, right? But I think that's the other piece is, like, oftentimes people get quite surprised at how grandparents need a lot more guidance than you may realize, so
'Cause we're like, "They've been through it, it's fine," but then we don't realize it was a different
oh,
time. The toys were different,
so
everything was
different.
different, you know? So I imagine, like, when my
Yeah.
kids have kids, they'll probably see me and be like, what are you doing? You can't do it like that."
Oh, yeah, we will be totally wrong, and, like, that's the thing, and hopefully we will have this type of situation to commemorate all of our thoughts, right? And the notion that we know that it'll be completely different where yeah, I mean, it was, like, always really funny. I feel like there should be, like, some channel about, like, grandparents, like, responding to the snoo. Like, what is this? What am I doing right now, right? I mean, my goodness. Actually, I think our Nanit recorded some of them. Speaking of things like the Nanit, like recording stuff, and I was like, what is this? The baby gear these days is absolutely wild.
And it keeps changing. It's gonna be so much
Yeah,
different when our kids have kids and
yeah,
just that's just the way it is, you know? It just keeps evolving and changing.
yeah. The robots are gonna come and they're actually just gonna like rock them to sleep and then, feed them and like put them back in their crib. It's like the robotic night nurse.
And you'll
It's
just see them on a screen. "Oh, okay, that's good."
You're like, "Oh." No, they're being, like, strapped up, like, all of the health monitoring, they're gonna have, like, little, like, sensors all over them that just tell you their health, so you're like, "Oh, wait, mom and dad, you were really worried that you would potentially there were this whole SIDS thing or, like, whatever, like, that was a thing? Like, oh, no, I just go to bed and, like, I don't have to worry that my baby's, like, unsafe." You're like, "Oh, cool, that's great." We just had all of this anxiety that you're, like, bring somebody home from the hospital, you have no idea what you're doing, and who knows if they're gonna survive the night.
Yeah, I remember that first day they left the baby in the room with me. I was like, "Are you sure you wanna do that? I've never been around a newborn. Like, you trust me with this baby?" And then I'm like, "I guess
Like,
it's
"What?"
mine." So,
Yeah, yeah, like, I mean, hey,
yeah,
you're like, I guess,
I guess this is
no
it.
day like today.
But
Oh gosh, and don't even get me started on breastfeeding, how well, I don't know if you went down that path, but my goodness. I was like, this does not feel normal or natural. I don't know how people did this. Like, this is like, nope.
yeah, and then they're telling you, like, the different holds, right? Like, "This is a basketball hold, this is the whatever," and I'm like, "Nope, not working." Like, I'm broken because this is not working,
Yeah,
so
yeah, 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 is this how this is supposed to feel? Like, I'm bleeding, thank you. Ow, ow. Whoa, okay, that's not working.
yeah, and it's like the baby's asleep. Is he full? Is he hungry? I don't know. He's asleep. And they're like, just try to pull him away. And then he starts sucking again, right? And then you're like, is he still hungry? I don't know. Tell me. Baby can't talk. So
Nope, nope, and then they start screaming, and you don't know why, and you're like, "And what's going? Is there anything in there? Oh, well, you'll know if they're gaining weight." Really? That's the best answer? You'll know if they're gonna get milk if they're gaining weight?
so I just pumped. I just
I guess
pumped.
yeah, you're like, "I guess there's not enough in there, or maybe there's enough, or they're just not getting it, or, like, I don't know." Like, right? I mean, you know these things.
And then they lose weight. And then you're like, oh God, I'm a bad parent. So I'll be doing some panels too on certain topics if you're interested.
I will give you all of the fun on the breastfeeding journey. That was like, I think for me, just well, and I had like all the stuff. I had oversupply. Parker did breastfeeding refusal. And so I exclusively pumped from when she was 3 months until 12 months. So we did straight breast milk for both kids, both for like a year, which to be honest, for Elle, pandemic, and then there was the formula shortage, and then she had a dairy allergy. So that's why I wanted to make it. And then Parker, I did out of guilt. I was like, if I made it to a year with Elle, like
Right. I got to do it with the other one.
fairness, right? Like I can do it for both of my girls, right? So I'm like, I think of the formula breastfed, like whatever, like fed is best, but I did make it for a year with both girls. And it was like the first week or two with Elle was like, I don't know. And then yeah, and then with Parker it was easier, but then she stopped eating, which is like crazy. It was awful. It was wild. That was a whole other thing.
That's so stressful. I know we're over time, but just really quick, how did you get her to eat again?
So the hardest part for that one was, I mean, it was a rabbit hole. So I had a pretty aggressive oversupply. And so she developed a weak suck because basically when she would nurse, milk would just fall into her mouth. And so she never really learned how to like suck correctly. And then also like a fun tip, the pacifiers we're using also were like not good at helping her develop a good suck. So I strongly recommend against using certain pacifiers as well. We learned that the hard way. So when they get to about 2 months, they get like agency, which is kind of amazing. She was like, "Oh, I don't like this." She was choking and spluttering because like I had like an aggressive letdown and all those things. I'd go to nurse her and she would scream, just like scream. And so we had started giving her a bottle even from when she was little, basically like first night home from the hospital stuff. And so she developed a similar problem on the bottle. And so she was choking. And so then she just like stopped eating. So she went from breast refusal to full bottle refusal. And we talked to our pediatrician, we talked to an occupational therapist. We ended up doing a bottle aversion therapy. That worked actually really well because for whatever reason, she was like, she had an aversion to like the bottle because of she would have control. We got her looked at by an ENT. We went to a pediatrician and got like a lip tie and a tongue tie reverse. That was actually probably the biggest one. She got so much more control of her mouth. Like she had a pretty bad, it was like basically like because I had an oversupply and she had an underdeveloped suck, like she didn't really learn how to actually like nurse per se. And then she also had a really hard time like with mouth control on the bottle because of some of her anatomy. And so we got the anatomy fixed. We basically did a bottle immersion program and kind of like got her trust because we were over offering like feeds because we were so worried she wasn't eating, which apparently that's like not a, so yeah, it was like, it was really tough. That was basically when she was like 2 to 4 months. I mean, she would go some days where she'd only eat like a few ounces during the day.
That's so stressful. And it's like you only know when you change her diaper, right? Like, okay, did she poop? Then,
Oh, no, we would know. She would refuse. She would
oh,
scream if
wow.
you tried to feed her, and then she'd be hungry. She'd refuse to eat still. It was, like, pretty it was pretty wild, and so, yeah, but no, and so we did it was, like, the bottle aversion program, was really interesting because basically it was, like, you had to be really regimented about how many times you offered the bottle because they were associating the bottle with discomfort and not nourishment. And so the breastfeeding version was the same. Like she was not associating like breastfeeding with comfort and like food. She was associating with being basically like waterlogged. And so that was tough. That was really tough. And so yeah, she ended up got the bottle aversion and then she ended up pretty consistently like taking bottles. And we did. We just kind of had to like let her kind of like regulate like when and what she would eat, have a lot more control, which is interesting because that's very much her personality now that she's and again, there's like mother like daughter. She's pretty stubborn and she likes to control her environment. And so that's, versus Elle was always like very laid back and she whatever. So it like she would like choke a little bit and like be fine, like whatever. And she'd just eat. And so all the things that kind of gave us confidence coming into parent the second time was like, you're dealing with a completely different person. And we had to adjust our approach and like try to figure out how to do something different. It was really interesting. And that's I think like the hard thing about parenthood and again, it's like Dan and I are such a good team because the most frustrating thing was just like trying to find answers. Like how people responded was sometimes, and we love our pediatrician, but it was like, oh well, like this is an era, it'll pass. And it's like, but like you're not dealing with a baby who's refusing to eat every day. And like every time we go to feed her, she might refuse the bottle even though she's hungry. Like she'll only eat at night when she's just like her guard's down and she's sleepy. Like that's like insane. Like I don't know what to do. So
Yeah, that was the most frustrating for me when I would talk to a teacher or a pediatrician and it was something I was concerned with, and they're just like, it's fine, it's normal, and just almost like laugh at me, like, why are you even bringing this up? But it's like, come on, man, I've never raised a kid. I don't know. So, like, just humor me,
yeah.
Like, this is a very serious thing.
Uh-huh.
I'm losing sleep over this, and you're just like, whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part is like we basically had and I think you learn it early. Like you kind of have to be that advocate for your kid, right? And I think that's, that parent instinct if you know something isn't right, or like you know that you need to get to figure out what the root problem is, that's ultimately what we had to do. Like we just had to talk to a lot of people. I had a fantastic lactation consultant. I also had a traumatic experience with lactation consultant. So funny. I was kind of amazing even like remembering it now. She was so awful. So I don't know if you've worked with many lactation consultants. I had a wonderful one. And so the spectrum is probably, but yeah. And then I had one who literally like came to my home and traumatized me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like those kinds of things when you find good support, it means everything. But when you have bad
Yes.
support,
Yeah.
it's just like, do I even want to continue to seek support?
Oh, what it was. I mean, I remember like, yeah, I remember my first meeting with the second one. Like I broke down crying, just describing the situation. And she was so kind and so patient and so empathetic for how hard the situation had been. No, the first literally when I basically told her that she wasn't being helpful, she's like, well, it sounds like you need a therapist. She told me that.
Jeez.
I was like, huh, huh, great.
Okay.
That's like I was like, "All right, cool." I think that you just told me a bunch of stuff that, like and then, like, also, like, anyway, that was wild. I really hope that she learned from the situation because I gave her an email that was very clear about, like, how her behavior, like, made me feel, and it was wild.
I mean, we're already going through so much at that time, like so many
Yeah.
changes, just all over, right? So, like, when you get that type of response or that type of interaction, it hits you even more harder than it normally would.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah, exactly. Like there's so many things going on. And I think that's just, parenthood. There's so many things to think about. And there is like, I mean, it's a lifetime job and you don't get to ever quit being a parent. You could potentially run away from it. And that's, like, let's don't say there aren't stories of people doing that, but you're still a parent, right? And you've brought another person to the world. And there's always that piece.
Definitely. But yeah, thank you, Liz, for chatting with me today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Tell. This has been so
I
much
know it's so
fun.
much fun. I feel like talking to you, I'm like, I have so many ideas of other conversations we could have. So I'll feel like seeing you
Yeah.
again in the future for like certain topics we can dig into
Yeah, I would love
because
to. This is great. And you asked great questions. And yeah, this was super fun to chat about.
yeah, it was so much fun. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for chatting with me. And I'm sorry for using up so much of your time. I know we went
Oh,
way over, but it
it's
was
all
so
good.
much
I must
fun.
say,
Thank
so
you.
the lovely thing of doing this on a Friday afternoon is I try to keep my Friday afternoons like super, super light because this is when I like try to like wrap up my week and reflect and all this stuff. So this has been really good. So very, very like energizing coming into the weekend. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great weekend ahead.
awesome. You too. Thanks, ciao.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, @parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.